having a conversation with a group of Asian women, and it was so lovely when we were sat there and they're saying, when women get described, it's always she's the daughter of or she's the wife of. And it would be lovely one day if we can always say, if the husband's ever described or the man's ever described, he is the husband of. I can see that coming. Husband of Jaspreet Kaur, author, poet. I can definitely see that.
I know. And I guess this is one of the things the book was trying to challenge, right? This is one of the things that Brown Girl Like Me was setting out to do, that especially for us as Asian women, we are always seen as the wife, the daughter-in-law, the this, the that, and it's like we're losing who we are within all those labels. So yeah, no, that's one of the things the book is trying to challenge, right?
Well, I've got your book here, and I've had the privilege of reading it. I must say I was totally engrossed. And what I love about it is it's so relatable to Asian women. It's so relatable in terms of our own lives. Your description of how your mum used to put oil in your hair every morning. I had the same battle. Please, Mom, I know it's good for me, but I don't want anyone smelling and telling me I smell or I look greasy. So we've all had that battle, and you've described it so well that you read it and you think, oh my God, that's definitely what happened to me in my childhood. So I think for me, it was such a fascinating read, but also to be able to go down memory lane and relive all those moments, but then also make you think about those moments and how we are in life today. And this is what I want to talk to you about your book, because I know a lot of women, a lot of brown women, coloured women, South Asian women have written books. They've done non-fiction and fiction. They're authors. Your book is very different, though. You've written it as if it's a guidebook for people like me, as if it is something that we can use as a Bible to refer back to. Well, that happened to me. It happened to Jaspreet. How did she deal with it? Kind of thing. Was that the intention?
I guess that was part of the intention. If I kind of go back to why I wanted to write this book and what inspired me to write it in the first place, it was because I felt like I never had this guidebook growing up. I never had kind of the tools to navigate lots of the situations that come up in the book and lots of those experiences that I describe. I always felt like there was just nothing to turn to other than perhaps the women in my family and maybe role models in kind of my family network. There were no other places for us to go to. So I guess that was one of the reasons I wrote this book, to put all this advice together, not only kind of anecdotal moments from my life, but looking at kind of academic research and then all the women that I interviewed for the book, collating all that information together so that we can use this as a toolkit, we can use this as a guidebook. And it hasn't got all the answers. Of course, there's still things in there that we're trying to figure out. And as the years go on, we'll learn how to navigate some of these situations. But I guess, yeah, we are calling it a guidebook. We're calling it a toolkit because hopefully younger South Asian women and girls can look at this book and it can help them navigate lots of these situations we have to go through. But also Asian women later on in their lives, women in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and later on can also look at this book and say, okay, now I know why I felt these certain things when I was younger and I know what to do better going forward. So yeah, it really is that. It is a guidebook that I wished existed. And I'm sure many other Asian women did too.
Definitely. I mean, personally, I think that's an incredibly powerful statement to make and to call it a guidebook, mainly because, I mean, certainly for my upbringing and reading your book, I'm sure it was the same for you. As Asian families, Asian community, we don't talk about things. We don't talk about our problems. Sitting down and having a debate or a discussion is out of the question. You would never be able to sit with the whole of your family and say, I've got an issue and I want to sound it out. I want to talk about it. That is very rare. So to be able to have something like this, when we don't have those kind of resources or those sounding boards within our families, within our communities, is quite a powerful thing. And so I don't know, do you realize the impact that something like this can make, and what kind of an impact do you hope for it to make?
Yeah, no, I guess I'm starting to recognize the impact a little bit more now that people are starting to read it. There are people reviewing it and getting to read it. And obviously when it comes out in February, it will reach lots more hands. But now I'm starting to see the impact it can have on people's lives, and women and girls telling me how healing they're finding it, how much of an impact it's having on them in the sense of, I feel like I'm feeling more empowered. I'm feeling like I'm healing from reading this book. And I think that's been an amazing piece of feedback that's coming back from this book. And I guess what you mentioned there about making this time for talk and talking amongst our families and our communities is one of the main messages from this book, that we as the South Asian community, we love to talk. Don't get me wrong.
But
We
others.
love to talk. Yes, mostly about others. But do we really make time to really talk about the things that matter and the things that can help one another? So this book is definitely encouraging that, about within our families, within our homes, within our communities, taking time to talk, and sometimes about those difficult topics, the taboo topics, the things that we like to brush under the carpet, those hard issues. We need to make that time for talk. And yeah, I guess kind of from that being one of the pieces of advice that comes out of the book, with lots of other kind of impactful pieces of advice and tools that I'm trying to give to South Asian women, I'm hoping it gives this feeling of healing going forward. And when I talk about kind of the main aims of the book, kind of what is the nucleus of this book, the way that I'm describing it is that the nucleus is essentially healing and to educate. And I'm hoping that's what this book does. It helps women heal, but it also helps educate not only South Asian women and girls reading this book, but everybody else too. I want brown men reading this book. I want white men reading this book, white women reading this book, to really understand our experiences and really develop, hopefully, kind of a better sense of empathy for one another in society, to understand what somebody else's experiences are like, so that we can do better for one another as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting what you said there as well, because it was one of my questions, to say that, is this book just catered towards women like me, or are you planning for a wider reach? And you've clearly said that you are. So how would you go about, getting those people to read this, and also understanding the challenges that you face, that people like me face, and also the details that you've written in the book about how you've overcome some of those challenges, and how other people can help in others like us dealing with those challenges. So how would you go about doing that? How would you go about reaching to those other communities with this book?
Yeah, no, it's a really important part of what I'm hoping this book can do, because ultimately, yes, it's aimed at South Asian women and girls and helping us navigate our lives. But a lot of the work needs to be done by the rest of society too. All that ownership can't be put on us, and all that labor can't be left to us as South Asian women. There's a lot that we need to see in wider society happening, so that we can also live happier and healthier lives. So I guess that's one of the aims of the book now, once it does come out in February. Number one, thinking about how can I reach all the communities that I need to reach, reaching as many South Asian women and girls as possible, but also thinking about, okay, how do I reach all these other communities? How do I reach potentially a mainstream community that doesn't read books like this, and all those sorts of things? So that's what we're thinking about now and trying to navigate now. And there's a number of different ways that we're trying to approach this. And I guess one of the places is thinking about, in kind of grassroots settings and organizations at community levels, how can we reach them? How can we reach people at a corporate level as well? I guess one of the chapters within the book, chapter 3, managing microaggressions, is looking at experiences within the workplace that many South Asian women have to go through on a daily basis, going to work, feeling like they have to morph into this different kind of person every day when they enter the workplace. And then when they go home, they kind of take off that armor and go back to who they are at home, and living this kind of multi-dimensional life. So there are a lot of changes we need to see in the workplace happening. So reaching those spaces. In chapter 2, I'm highlighting some of the issues within the education system and some of the changes that need to happen there, so that South Asian girls in schools and in university and academic institutions feel valued. So I guess kind of piecing the book out, thinking about the communities it needs to reach, the people it needs to reach, so that we can have some of this change happening. Because this book isn't just for South Asian women and girls, it's for everybody. So making sure that everybody does take time to read it, because we as South Asian women, we are a predominant part of the population here, not only in the UK, but in other parts of the Western world. And it's about time people heard us and listened to us and understood our perspective from our voice. Because for many years, people have been talking on behalf of South Asian women. And for many years, the South Asian woman's voice has been completely ignored and erased. So this is us saying we are here. This is who we are, we exist, and to hear it from our voice. So yeah, we need everyone to read this book.
Brilliant. No, I agree. They have to read this book, and I'll be mentioning it to everybody I meet. But what I wanted to ask was as well, it's taken you 7 years to write it, a long time. And for me, I wish I had this book before, because it's a great read, and it's quite comforting as well in many senses, because it's so relatable. So that 7-year journey, what I want to know was, what was that like, that journey to get to this point? Because there must have been loads of hurdles in between. And I remember reading the part where you finally, because of lockdown, sat down, and that's why it finally got completed. Had lockdown not happened, would you ever have finished it, firstly? But also, describe that 7-year process. What was that like? How did you come in and out of writing and then finally finishing the book?
So yeah, it's been a long journey. It's been a long journey to get to this point. And I think so often, because of this world of social media and the digital age, we so often see the product, we so often see the final outcome, and that's what's shared to the rest of the world and shared to the public. But that kind of long journey to get to that point often doesn't get seen. So I'm really glad you mentioned that it's been a very long journey to get here. So 7 years ago was around the time when I was doing my master's in gender studies. I just finished my undergrad in history, went on to study gender studies and sociology. And I was doing a research thesis on a really heavy topic in the South Asian community. I was looking at the ongoing son preference within South Asian communities, and how not only the South Asian community, but other regions of Asia, this kind of ongoing son preference has resulted in almost 60 million missing girls, according to the UN. And when I was doing this research and understanding that there is that many missing girls because we prefer sons for economic reasons, for social reasons, for cultural reasons, I just had kind of so much frustration within me that how is this happening? How is it still happening, not only in Asia, but also in the Western world, that people are preferring to have sons over daughters, and the impact that's having on us girls, the impact that then has on how we see ourselves, our self-confidence, our self-belief. And I guess I did that research paper. I then went into teaching. I'd always wanted to become a teacher for quite some time. I knew I wanted to go into secondary education and become a teacher. So I was teaching both history, sociology, and a bit of politics in secondary schools in London. I then saw lots of experiences there within the classroom, and that's something that's highlighted in chapter 2 about how South Asian girls were being treated in schools, but also kind of reflecting on my own experiences when I was in school and when I was at university about the fact that South Asian girls academically, we're the second smartest in the country. Academically, we're doing very well at GCSE level, at A level, and then going into further education, it kind of dwindles off. But what I couldn't understand was that, okay, if academically we're doing so well and we are very smart women, why is that not being reflected in wider society? Why is that not being reflected in the media, in politics, in corporate settings, and also kind of other levels of society? Why are Asian women not being conveyed in that way? So kind of all this frustration was building for a very long time, and I was kind of noting down all these experiences. I was kind of writing pieces of a chapter here, writing a bit here. And then it got to 2020, the start of 2020, and I decided to take a break from teaching to really pursue this journey as an author, as a writer, and start working on this book. And then kind of around that time, I was trying to understand how to get published as a writer. How does that work? And as somebody that comes from an ethnic minority background, also a working class background, I didn't have any kind of family or friends that were authors, or didn't know anybody in the publishing industry. So I didn't know how it all worked. So I spent a good year or so really understanding how the publishing industry works, looking at different avenues about getting published. So that also took some time. And then it was a matter of getting the idea out there and seeing if it had legs, seeing if any publishing house wanted to pick it up. And that happened at the start of 2020, and thankfully it did get picked up. The book was signed, and then I got on to finishing it, and I got on to writing it. But it has been a long journey. It's been 6-7 years, and I've spent the last 3 years interviewing Asian women. I've been interviewing South Asian women from across the country, but also other parts of kind of diasporic countries from South Asia. Women as young as kind of the age 15, 16, all the way up to women in their 80s and 90s from kind of every South Asian demographic. I think that was very important to me to reflect who is a brown woman. That's Pakistani women, Indian women, Sri Lankan women, Bangladeshi women, also women from kind of Nepal, East African countries, and other kind of diasporic countries, and kind of collating all those voices together to share who we are and to write this book, Brown Girl Like Me. So yeah, it's been a long journey, but we are here, and it is coming out. And I guess this is the scary bit. I think the writing bit I thought was scary. I thought that bit was hard, but now is the scary bit where everyone gets to read what it is that I've been working on for so long.
So it's like the 7-year journey, and now it's time for the reaction, the feedback from the audience. But I think it just goes to show that all that extensive research, that experience, both in personal life, in professional life, in the classroom, as well as a teacher, they make for really interesting, real reading. And I think that's why a lot of people will find the book really relatable, especially currently where there's a big debate or a big trend in terms of talking about representation. Are we getting the representation that we want in terms of as a country, in terms of films, in terms of in all kinds of life, in public life, in business life? So my question really to you is, you've written this book, you've done extensive talks as well with TEDx and several other universities, talking about your experiences and also about identity and representation. So because you have all that knowledge and because you've been speaking about it for ages, my question to you is, as a South Asian woman today, obviously we didn't have it when we were growing up many years ago, but today, because now there's so much, we're in the digital era, do you think that representation for women like us is finally there, or do you think we've still got a long way to go?
Oh, that's a really good question. I guess I would definitely say we're moving in the right direction. I would definitely say there's been a significant change from perhaps when I was a young girl. If I look at kind of teenage Jaspreet and looking at the world that I saw then, and never seeing brown faces on TV screen, in books, in music, in any mass media, in the public sphere, in the private sphere. If I compare it to back then, I think we've definitely had an improvement and we're kind of moving in the right direction. But I still feel there's a lot more work to be done. I still feel there are lots of arenas that South Asian women are still getting ignored in. And that's something that's been highlighted in the book, that there are certain spaces that we have still not been able to navigate or approach or take up space in. So I think we are moving in the right direction, but there's still more work to go. And I feel like the job will be done when we've got young South Asian girls feeling like that they are represented and they feel like they can be anything they want to be. When we get to that point where we see young brown girls that are like, I can do whatever I want in my life and I feel empowered, I feel valid, I feel like my voice is heard. When we're at that point, then I feel like, okay, that job is done, but I still feel we've got a lot more work to do, but we are moving in the right direction. Even seeing how many South Asian authors and writers are now coming into the book space is a really good sign. But also the fact that I don't want just to see South Asian women talking about South Asian women experiences. And sometimes that's something I'm battling with as a writer, that yes, the first book that I've written is about the brown woman's experience, but I feel like we shouldn't be pigeonholed into just writing about that. We should be able to write and create just as humans, just as people, and all the other interests and things that make up who we are. Those things should also be explored. So I don't want us to feel like we're being pigeonholed into just writing about those things. And I guess it's hard for me to say, considering like this has been my first book, but that's what I hopefully want to see over the years, that specifically in the writing world and in that space, we're seeing South Asian women writing about all sorts of things in all kinds of places, so that we aren't being pigeonholed to just write about brown stories and brown experiences, and it feels a bit more wider and more holistic than that.
Fantastic. So my final question to you, Jaspreet, if you were to give a message now to your readership, what would you say to them?
Oh, what message would I like to say to them? To read this book. So definitely
that's a good start.
Brown Girl Like Me and read this book. But I guess to the readership, those that are reading it, what I really hope people do is unpack how all of these stories and everything that I've put together in this book kind of relates to their lives and helps them question perhaps some of the experiences that they've gone through, but ultimately how they can now make choices so that they feel that they are in the driving seats of their own lives, and that decisions aren't being made on their behalf, and that they do feel more empowered in those decisions. And I guess one of the foundations of this book is that I'm encouraging brown women to start from a foundation of self-love, and to start building this very strong foundation of loving who we are and loving ourselves, so that anything that we build upon that and anything that happens in life that goes on top of that foundation is built on a strong foundation, and it's built on this strong foundation of self-love. So hopefully the readership, hopefully once they read this book, they do develop that sense of loving who they are, so that they feel they can navigate their lives going forward.